Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dine with the Divine. I'm your host, Ashley, and together we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, and everything in between. So, on today's episode, we're going to talk about Wicca and the Queen of the Night. So, I hope everybody's having a great week, and if not, I hope it gets better soon. So, today we have an absolutely fabulous guest. I'm so excited as usual. We have Courtney. So, Courtney Weber is a witch, author, tarot advisor, and activist. She's the author of Bridget, History, Mystery, and Magic of the Celtic Goddess, Tarot for One, The Art of Reading for Yourself, The Morgan, Celtic Goddess of Magic and Might, and Hekate, or Hekate, whichever one you like, Goddess of the Witches. She also is the co-host of That Witch Life podcast. Courtney has been featured in Maxim, Huffington Post, Vice, and the Thom Hartman Show. Hey, Courtney, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Ashley. I was so excited to see your name in my inbox. It's been far too long.
I know. I met you at Reader Studio a long time ago.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Or it was Northwest. I also remember you at Northwest Terrace. No.
Yes.
You were both. Okay, I couldn't remember which one I actually met you at, but
yeah,
I know we sucked you into the Bad Girls Club immediately. And I realized that was one of those, I said, why is it whenever I go to a conference, no matter what table I'm at, it's always the bad girls table, always the troublemakers. And then I was like, I guess there's one common denominator. And we absorbed Ashley immediately. It's like, one of us, naughty girl, join us and get in trouble. That's pretty cool.
I don't know, but you also, you just know all the cool people. Well, first of all, everybody who goes to Northwest, all of the, at least they're the two I've been to, and everybody's cool there. Everybody is super awesome, but I just feel like you gravitate towards the real coolest people. There's no hierarchy, but we love everybody, but you just always know really cool people. And you're like one of those people who knows everybody. You're like the mayor of Tower Town. I feel like you know everybody.
I might be a deposed mayor. It's been a few years since I've been to any of these conferences. I hope I still know people. They haven't forgotten about me. I'm like some antiquated relic that they have to call out of a Ouija board and who doesn't speak the language and is like got all these weird customs.
Oh my God, I love it. So I usually always ask everybody, so I'll ask you so people, in case they don't know. How did your journey with all of your writing and your witchcraft and all that stuff, how did it start?
Oh gosh, it's so funny because I asked that almost the exact same question on my podcast, and then when it's posed to me, I'm like, oh my God, what a huge question to start. How mean of me to ask that of people every week, and here I am being forced to do it. When I was a kid, I was always super interested in religion, but not like what I think now what I would call is for the mysticism of it. Mm-hmm. I was raised functionally Catholic, but you know, my mom's family is Southern Baptist, and so we were influenced a lot from them. And then I was raised in very secular Oregon, so just had a lot of different threads that were feeding me. And so I was really interested in prayer and the rosary, but a lot of it was like not because I was trying so hard to be a good child of God. Certainly there was part of that, but also I was really interested in what the power of spirit. It's very interesting because I found my old Bible that I used to try to read every night at bedtime. And I would highlight passages, which is what I thought you were supposed to do, that were meaningful. All my passages were about casting out spirits and God and anything that had to do with death and destruction. I mean, I was really into the dramatic parts of the Bible. Like, as like a 9-10-year-old kid, I was like, whoa, and really was like craving stories about angels and demons and ghosts and things like that. And then as a teenager, I started to rebel and was really had a lot of problems with both Catholicism and Southern Baptist faiths, just politically speaking. And in fact, I think that they felt restrictive to me and what I wanted my beliefs to be fed. I wanted more of the magic that I felt was present in both religions and still believe that's there, but I just couldn't I didn't have access to it in a way. I mean, sometimes now I wonder if I had learned more about the magic of the saints or more about Appalachian folk magic as a young person, that if I would have stayed on the Christian path but been like a hardcore Christian mystic. But that really wasn't available. I'm an ancient millennial, like in the nursing home of millennials. And so this was like the 90s when you could find books on being a good Christian, books on being a good Protestant, being a good Catholic, being a good Protestant, or being a Wiccan witch, which had belief in a goddess and specific rituals and things. And it's so funny. A friend of mine from high school said she found some of the old notes I used to pass her. And instead of talking about boys and things, I was talking about messages I felt like God was giving me. And so I was just always hardcore into it. And that was, we just had this anniversary of 9/11. And that was a huge turning point for me in my witchcraft journey. The summer of 2001, I had an internship at a theater. And I had an internship at a theater and was very lonely. I was pretty out of place, and I was having a really hard time finding my social footing. I'd never been away from home, and I was 19 going on 20 and didn't have I didn't go away to college. I went to college in my town and stayed living with my parents. So this was my first time away, and it was a very different culture, and I just couldn't. I had a very hard time just talking to people. It was really like I didn't understand why that was, and I understand it more now. It's being without your grounding and for the first time and not knowing what to do with that.
Nugget agrees. Yeah.
So I spent that summer talking to trees, because the trees became my friend, and talking to what I called God at the time, and read a book on Wicca, and was just on my 20th birthday, just asked the question of no one, like, am I a witch? Is that what I've been all along? And I just felt like the world lit up, like, oh, thank God she finally figured it out. And so I was just like, okay. And I would look back now and call that a self-initiation, because I just was so full of spirit. I wanted to go hug people and tell people what had happened. But of course, they're all in the midst of trying to put together a regional theater production, working with Broadway folk. And there's a lot of pressure in those environments. Nobody had time for the weird girl from Oregon who said that God was talking to her and told her she was a witch. Nobody had time for that. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. Like, that's just not, that was not the reasonable time or place for that. But that was the summer, and it was end of the summer. We're about to wrap up. It was like the first week of September, and I had this incredibly frightening nightmare. And I dreamt that, I still get chills thinking about it to this day. I dreamt that there was a city of people who were dying, and they were covered in blood, and they were walking around not realizing they were dying. And that the United States was under attack from some kind of ethnic group that I did not recognize. And I was trying to escape, and I was trying to warn people, but nobody believed me. It was very much a Cassandra dream. And the one thing, then there was a woman in my dream who walked up to me and said, here, wear this and it will protect you. And it was a burqa. I didn't know what a burqa was. I'd seen pictures of them in National Geographic. But the only thing that would protect me from these people that were coming to kill a whole city was a burqa. And I woke up feeling like something was really wrong. And I actually talked about it with people. I said, I've had a really scary dream that something bad happened to a city. And looking back now, those people I saw in the city were people I knew were New Yorkers. I didn't recognize it as New York. I just saw it as a big city. But I was like, no, the dream was trying to tell me that it was coming for New York. Wow. And everybody said, oh, whatever, we probably have it coming. Like that very late 90s, early aughts attitude. Because we had it, the United States collectively had not experienced that kind of thing in well over a generation. So but I still felt like it was wrong, and I don't understand it, and I don't know what's going on. And then a week later was when the towers fell. And I remember sitting there watching the television in my grandmother's house and watching these towers fall and realizing that had been my dream. And then it even came more full circle, because in the weeks that followed, there's stories about the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and the fact that the women were forced to wear burqas in that part of the world. And I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This is what my dream was trying to tell me. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is I guess I am a witch, and I guess this is what I'm doing. And It's so funny because I started a career in professional theater after college, but really what was making me stand out was my connection to witchcraft and reading tarot. And I was reading tarot for the actors and the interns and stuff like that, and was the little strange little witch who would walk around in the woods at night with a black cat outside the theater. Like just almost like cliche ridiculousness. Back in New York City and trying to get a fiction writing career going and hanging out with a bunch of artists, and the one piece of art everybody wanted from me was witchcraft. We want more witchcraft. And so I just followed that path. Ended up running a coven and publishing a tarot deck, and then publishing 4, almost 5 books. I've got my 5th book coming out next year. So that's a long-winded story. But you said it was a meandering conversation. So yeah, so 9/11 has that kind of powerful significance for me. And I think it did for a lot of people. Like a lot of people started turning to their own faiths or their own spiritual journey in the wake of that tragedy as a way of, and that's very common when people are frightened, they turn to faith, they turn to spirituality. We're seeing it now in a very dramatic way on all sides of the spiritual religious spectrum, in response to climate change, in response to a more violent world. It's in some ways, and unfortunately, I feel like that's linked to authoritarianism. I know, honey, it's scary. It's okay.
I know. Sorry, I'm not laughing, but the word authoritarianism is very scary. And Nugget was like, "Oh, what is that?"
I don't like that, Mommy. I don't like what happens to your body when you say that. You got a long, long road ahead of you, Muffin. Okay, Mommy's going to teach you everything she knows, and then you can tell me what doesn't work.
That's all we're all doing, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's that story. Now to show how antiquated I am.
Not at all. No, I relate so well. I was like I've always been super into religion, and it's the same. It's like I like all the mystical parts of it. That was always my thing. And then it's so funny. So you had that dream of 9/11. I also had a 9/11 dream, weirdly enough, before I had I remember the night before I had a dream that I was in a really high tower with 2 of my friends, and we were like there eating lunch or something. And I was in 8th grade during 9/11, but we were there and then one of the friends' parents was there, and then there was like a long slide. So I went down this slide. She went down the slide first, my friend, and then I went. And when I got to the end of the slide, there was like glass all over the ground, and I fell into this like big thing of just broken glass. And when I looked up, there was just like a gray mist everywhere, and it was I heard sirens, and people were running around, and they were hurt. People had bandages, or people were holding their heads or their eyes. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I remember so vividly having this dream. And same, like I woke up and I was like, I remember going to school, because when I was in middle school, we like got to the school. We had to wait outside the school before we got in. Standing in line with my friends and being like, guys, I had this weird ass dream, and telling them, they're like, yeah, that's so weird. And then it was like 2 hours later that like everything happened. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I think that is such a. I mean, I think at some point we're going to find the chemical in our DNA that makes these things happen. I think it is I think it's an evolutionary gift. Our bodies are not really fit for this planet. We don't have fur, we don't have scales, we don't see very well, we don't run very fast, we don't hear very well, we don't have claws. Our offspring literally cannot survive without us for the first several years of their life. I mean, and other animals, like the babies are born and they just start running. I mean, and that is not us. We are just really, really a mess. But I think in addition to having quote unquote superior intelligence, I'm not going to quote unquote superior intelligence. I feel orcas out there going like, really now?
I know.
And endurance. We're very inventive, and we have quite a bit of endurance. I think that Homo sapiens, human beings, and I'm sure in animals too, we have that instinct within us when there's danger coming. There's animals that move to higher ground before a tsunami or something like that. They just know. And I think that we just know.
Yeah.
We know that if you think about like we're Homo sapiens are pack animals, and if you think of the United States as our, I don't want to make it like I'm careful saying this because I'm not a nationalist. I do not embrace the it's us against the world mentality. And also I think that probably in an evolutionary sense, that's like, well, these are the people that live where I live. This is my pack. And there's a threat that's coming to it. And I think that we've always had that. Somebody is out. We go back to the cave days, although I don't think anybody ever lived in caves. I think that caves have always been a place of mystique. Humans didn't really live in them. But let's just say, for example, that they're in the cave days, you're living near the cave, you're in the hut or whatever, and you have this sense that I think I'm going to sleep with my eyes open tonight and I'm going to keep my knife in my hand. And that's the night a saber-toothed tiger shows up and tries to eat the babies. Or you're out you're in the forest gathering berries, fruit, and you think, you know what, I think I need to bring home a little more of this herb. Bring home a little more of that herb, and you find that the village elder is very ill.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that have all the medical knowledge. And so you're like, oh, well, good thing that I had that instinct to bring that. There's something that we just know when something's going on. And we've given ourselves so many conveniences. And I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that we have developed technology to make ourselves live better. But, we don't need that as much as we did 50,000 years ago when we absolutely had to have that.
Yeah.
In order to survive. We've given ourselves quite a few more tools so we can not think about that and then now we better use that technology to figure out how to keep us from offing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that.
Yeah. So
yeah. Oh, so many good points. I love that. So okay, you have properly now introduced yourself, which we're so happy to know everything about you. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go to our next section so we can get on to the next section because I'm very excited for our other two topics too. So we're going to go to our dish of the week this week. So this week, now you live in Oregon.
Yes.
Okay. So I have been to, like we talked about, I went to the Northwest Tarot Symposium one time. So I went to Portland one time in my whole entire life. Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. Obviously, I just said that. Okay. So everybody knows what I'm talking about. So I remember when I went to Portland, the thing there is like food trucks. Yes, it's a big thing. And I was like, okay, food trucks. We have food trucks here in Jersey, but it's like a festival thing, or it's like you go to an outdoor festival, you get food from the food truck. But there it's like a thing, like you get dinner from the food truck.
Yeah.
Like and the food, okay, and anybody who lives in Jersey, I'm not talking about grease trucks. I'm not talking about small food trucks at a festival. I'm talking about like gourmet ass food you're getting from a cool food truck. This is not a game out there. No. It's not a game at all. This is serious. And the food from these different food trucks is like actually delicious. So I looked up this list of 20 food trucks that define Portland. Now, I've had people where we do like regional foods and people sometimes don't agree, and that's totally fine. And that's why I bring it up, because I like somebody who has probably been around it to tell me if it's right or wrong. And it tells you, I think, what street it's on. So I'm just going to mention a few. I think one of these I've even been to. I'm not sure. But okay. So the first food truck we have here is Bayon Kainan, which is in Kearns. This is a Filipino cuisine food truck, which sounds delicious. If you like some pancit, if you like some lumpia, I know I love some lumpia. All the Filipino aunties that I've worked with throughout my life make delicious lumpia, and we love it. Then we have Bari Food Cart. Bari Food Cart is on Foster Powell. Okay, this is a pizza food truck. Oh, like a Southern Italian street food truck. So we got calzones. We've got small pizzas. They deep fry the pizza dough. That sounds delicious. I like deep fried pizza dough. I mean, it's not like very good for you, but it's delicious. Everything deep fried obviously is probably not good for you. Then we have Bing Mi or Bing Mai. I'm not sure which one, but it's Bing. Let's just say Bing Mi. This is a Chinese street food truck, and it's in Northwest. The other thing about Portland is there's like Northwest. It's like Washington, D.C., and it's very confusing to me. People in Portland are like, why is it confusing? We understand. I'm like, yeah, because you guys live here. But to other people, it can be a little confusing with the Northwest and the Southwest. And
It's so funny. I had that conversation with my husband because we actually don't live in Portland. We're in a little town about an hour south of Portland. And so a lot of these, really dating myself, we used to call them roach coaches back in the day. And so I still in my mind think of them as roach coaches, but no, they are food trucks. I've been working on the branding, but I almost said I used to remember the roach coaches from back in the day. There was one that was really good falafel at the Portland State campus, but I don't know a lot of those places. Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school Portlander. Like, I've never had a voodoo donut. When I was living, I lived in New York City for 13 years after college, and when I was in college here in Portland. Or in Portland, where we would get donuts is we would take speed and get in the car and drive 5 hours north to the one Krispy Kreme in the Pacific Northwest, where it would in Issaquah, Washington, so we would get in the car at midnight and get there at 5 a.m. so that we could get the donuts as they rolled off the conveyor belt.
oh my
So
god, that's awesome.
that's my Portland donuts. Like, oh, voodoo donuts! Like, never had it. I was a take uppers and drive to Issaquah kind of girl, So yeah, the voodoo that came later, and so I don't even really consider it a Portland thing. I think of it as a thing that came to rest in Portland, like an alien invader from outer space that just showed up, and we just accepted it and welcomed it as one of our own. But I don't think of it as a Portland thing. It's just there now, but it came in on a comet or something. I don't know, because real Portlanders, it's like I said, take speed and drive to the one Krispy Kreme 5 hours away. That's what we do.
Oh my gosh. I don't. Here's the thing. I really like Portland. I think it's a great place. I watched a lot of Portlandia. So I also had a lot of expectations of Portland. But then, like, I got there and it was exactly like Portlandia to me. I was like, I'm trying not to stereotype. But this is like 10 years ago, so maybe things are different. But
yeah, things have changed a bit. Portlandia was a very specific slice of time. And I've always hated that show because it's so inaccurate, but also so very accurate that I just can't handle it. That it just makes me angry. It makes the parts that are not accurate make me angry, and the parts that are accurate make me more angry. So I just don't. It's like watching Sex in the City when you live in New York. You're like,
yeah.
Except there's like nobody lives that way, except that some of the mentality. I mean, I feel like Seinfeld was a much more legitimate New York City show, except that they still couldn't have afforded those apartments. Like that's the Los Angeles influence right there. Yes. But yeah, no, but I just never could. I never could with it. But I remember like there's some of my old school Portland friends. We talk about things being too much Portland, and we just can't. Like I went to a wedding that was on somebody's front porch. I got the wedding invite via email. And this was before same-sex marriage was legal nationwide. So it was certainly more of a ceremony of commitment than it was a legal marriage. Because it was two women. And inside, it was just very, and like everybody kind of pitch in. So I knew I hadn't seen one of the brides in years. I still showed up and was offering to help. And somebody said, oh, could you help put the cakes out? And I said, sure, because a lot of people brought different cakes. And I was like, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And then I said, where should I put them? She said, why don't you move this trunk over there and then you can set the cakes there? And I said, well, that's not a problem. Yeah, I can do that. That's fine. And I started to move the trunk and somebody said, oh no, I'm sorry. I was offered to set up the trunk and the lady said, no, that's too heavy. Don't set it there. I don't want you to hurt yourself. Set it over here on the table. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I'm setting up all the cakes, and all of a sudden this woman walks up and stopped me, and she goes, hi, what are you doing? And I said, well, I was asked to set the cakes up. Oh, okay, you can do what you want, but don't you think it'd be better if you set them up on the trunks? And I said, sure, but I was told not to, but I can. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but don't you think it'd be better if they were over here instead of over here in the kitchen? I said, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then I start to move the trunk, and it is too heavy, and I almost knocked it over on somebody's kid.
Oh, no.
And so I almost crushed a kid with this giant trunk, and then finally got it set up. And then I start moving the cakes out, and well, little Miss Squeaky voice comes back around. She goes, hey, I'm so sorry. I don't really mean to, I don't want to bother you, but you can do whatever you want. but don't you think we should put some signs up for the cakes? And I'm like, well, I'm happy to. I asked about that, but I was told there were no signs saying. She goes, well, you can do whatever you want. Some people have a gluten allergy, and some people have a dairy allergy, and some people are vegan. Don't you think we should have signs to say what the cakes are? And I said, I'm happy to, but I don't know where this. I was told there were no signs. I don't mean to upset you. I feel like you're getting really angry with me right now. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to let you handle this. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. So I walked out on the front porch, and I'm standing there. And this guy walks up to me, and he goes, hey, you're Courtney. You moved to New York City, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, it's really expensive there, huh? And I went, yeah, it's pretty expensive. How much do you pay for rent? And I'm like, well, I don't really think that's any of your business. Well, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just curious. Because you guys pay a lot of rent there. You pay like way more rent there than we do here. Yeah, that's true. We do. Yeah. I didn't mean to offend you, though. You seem like you're really offended. Well, that's what I pay for rent in New York City. Oh, okay. Is it really stressful there? Like, are people really stressful? It's like really uptight. Like, people seem like they're really uptight there. And I'm like, well, I guess. I mean, you know, and he goes, because people here are much more relaxed, right? Like in Portland, they're much more relaxed. I'm like, well, it depends. What do you mean it depends? What do you mean? We're like really laid back here. Like, really laid back here. And I'm like, I have to go. I have to go now. I have to leave this wedding. I can't be here anymore. And then I go and I see some friends of mine who had left Portland and went to move to Lincoln City on the coast. I said, I think there's too much Portland here. They're like, there's way too much Portland here. Because all those fuckers that were pestering me, none of them grew up there. They were all refugees from other cities. Which, like, welcome, sure. But, oh my God, leave me alone. Like, and then they go, you're obviously not from around here. No, I grew up here. Well, you haven't lived here in a while because you don't know anything about Portland. Like, when did you move here? 3 years ago? Yeah, how'd you know? Like, I moved here in 86. Oh my God. So it's going full circle. Like when I was a kid growing up, like you couldn't really go to downtown Portland or Northwest or anything because it was pretty dangerous. And then it got like super, super not dangerous. And now it's dangerous again. And so all the people that came here, they're like, oh, this is not the city it once was. I'm like, yes, it is. It is. What do you want? What do you want? And so like the old timer Portlanders are sticking around. Everybody else is leaving. And we're just letting them like, bye.
Yeah, because it definitely had, yes, when Portlandia was out, it was like peak, I feel like peak hipster era, peak, like everybody was like, oh, you have to live in Portland and everything there. There was all these vegan places, which are great. And all these, everything was very specific to people's food preferences and like all that kind of stuff. So I think, and then there was like all that influx of people moving there, which caused a lot of issues with people becoming unhoused because then
it was rents went up.
Yeah, the rents went up and
and I get it. I never really had an issue with people wanting to move to Portland to live a certain way. I mean, I moved to New York because I want to live a certain way. My issue was when people who didn't grow up in Portland were complaining about people moving to Portland. That's when I was like, okay, no, I don't get to go to New York and complain about people moving to New York. You don't get to move out here and complain about people moving out here.
Exactly.
Like, that's not how that's just not okay.
Yeah.
You can be here and be happy to be here. And I mean, that's the kind of, like, I remember I met somebody who was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I asked them if they were mad that people were always moving to the city, and he said no, because when people move to a place, they bring new life, they bring breath to it, they bring energy, because otherwise you start to take it for granted. And so that's where I was like, no, I never begrudge people moving to Portland, except for when we started having the rich people from the north, the Microsoft people, and the rich people from the south and the Bay Area coming up and like buying up all the properties in cash. Like that sucked. But that was happening all over the country in some of these more affordable places. So that made me sad. But like regular people who just want to come to because they want to be different, they need to get out of their hometown, they want to be near nature. And I just don't begrudge them at all. I mean, I moved away from that because growing up here, I knew everybody at the time, and it was hard to really be the person I wanted to be when everybody was going, people remember you as the mold that you grew up in.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really grow up, even in Portland, I didn't really grow up in a community that encouraged self-actualization. It was more like, you are who you are, and you are who we want you to be.
Yeah.
And that was not what I was okay with. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh,
So,
yes.
yeah, it's fine that y'all moved to Portland. It's not okay that you complain that other people moved to Portland.
Yeah. Yes. A Portlander telling us about Portland is what we need to know.
It's
So
called
that
port-splaining, and it's best done by someone who didn't grow up here. They are the best port-splainers.
Port-splaining.
Port-splaining. I've been port-splained many times, and I warned that to a friend of mine. Like, when you get to Portland, you're going to be port-splained. And she texts me. She goes, "Oh my God, I haven't even left PDX, and I've been port-splained at the Portland airport. I got port-splained." I'm like, yeah.
Well, everybody, when you go to Portland to go try some of these food carts, be careful. Don't get port-splained.
Oh, you'll get port-splained. You're going to get port-splained.
Somebody who has only lived in Portland for a few years may come up to you and port-splain you, and now you know the name of it.
Port-splain you. I mean, I guarantee you they will port-splain you. Although I'm not sure port-splaining is what it was 10 years ago. Port-splaining was a big thing 10 years ago. Now people are like, watch your wallet.
That too. Watch your wallet.
I mean, you have to do that in any city, though, really.
Of course, yeah. Pretty much everywhere.
You know, it's like my conservative relatives are like, everything in Portland is on fire. And I'm like, not really. It's just acting much more like a big city than it has when it used to feel like a small town. So yeah, there's crime, but they're like, you can't go anywhere. And I'm like, you'll get killed by some Antifa. And it's like, well,
wow, Antifa. I haven't heard that in a while.
Not accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband and I last fall, we came into Portland, spent 3 nights. It's so fun to be on vacation in your own town because you get to enjoy all the things you watch other people enjoy. So we got a B&B and we did all the fun Portland stuff. And then we went on this really great ghost tour in Old Town. And Old Town's always had an element of you need to watch your wallet. Don't park there, take an Uber because your car is likely to get broken into. I mean, every city has that pocket.
Oh yeah.
And Old Town is that pocket. But we could tell there were some folks from out of town that they had their fanny packs and they were touching each other, looking around, and they're just like, we just don't feel safe in this part of town. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not great, but every city has a section that's not great.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, you're gonna be fine. Oh, so.
Oh God. Oh, so I will have a list in the show notes of the rest of the food carts, but you can basically literally get anything you want from these food carts. Just know that. I could listen to you talk about Portland for hours.
And I love there's a few things I love more than making fun of Portland. It's really fun.
So I'm gonna do my plug. So if you guys enjoyed this show, you can follow me on all the socials. I'm Dine with the Divine on Instagram, Dine with the Divine on Facebook. If you really like this show, feel free to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you can. And you can write a little review if you are so inclined. You can even give us a tip if you'd like. Also, if you have any suggestions for episodes, questions, comments, criticisms, constructive pleas, and just be nice, feel free to email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. Okay, so we're going to go to our next section. So our next section is tea time. Now, tea time, we're going to learn something, and we're all going to learn together. So I thought Courtney is one of the best sources for this. So I find that with the modern, now everybody wants to be witchy, quote unquote, right? And there's nothing wrong with being witchy, nothing wrong with wanting to be witchy. I'm totally cool with it. But one thing I think that is interesting is most people who are into the aesthetic or whatever they're into have never heard of Wicca or don't know what Wicca is. Now, obviously, if you want to be a quote unquote witch, you don't have to be Wiccan. And I think vice versa. But it's just interesting that there's not a lot of knowledge out there about it, I find. Maybe I'm not running in the right circles. I don't know. But I just find that people don't really seem to know a lot about that. I don't know what you think about that, Courtney. I might be wrong.
It's funny because I'm actually not technically Wiccan. So
I just know you know a lot of history. That's why I thought.
Yeah. So I think for folks that really want to learn more about Wicca, I would recommend following Thorne Mooney's work. Mm-hmm. He is very no-nonsense, highly knowledgeable source on Wicca in its traditional sense. So Wicca, though, in its form, was really an attempt by some British witches to try to re-embrace their indigenous religion, which had been wiped out for thousands of years. That were basically turned into folklore and stuff like that. And first starting with the Romans moving in and bringing in their stuff, and then eventually you had different invasions. I'm not a great scholar on British history, but in the 1940s, Gerald Gardner was looking to start a religion that embraced it, like, or revived indigenous practices from that region. What he ultimately did was a lot of co-opting from some ceremonial traditions that were already in existence. And there's the story, I believe it was called the New Forest Covenant. I know there are Wiccans out there who are screaming because I'm getting all this wrong. But I'm not getting all of it wrong.
It's okay. I have a bunch of facts that I'll list when we're done. When you're done. Yeah.
And so the story was that he was initiated by someone who was in this mysterious existing coven. And that's highly debatable as to whether that coven actually existed. Were there probably people that were getting together and talking to trees and trying to embrace spirituality? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't believe that there is an unbroken lineage of religious witchcraft that was driven underground during the burning times and then was resurrected in the 40s by Gerald Gardner. No, I think that he created a lot of it. That doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. All religions start somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And every religion has magic in it. And so I think he pulled together some of those pieces and connected it with a feminine divine and a belief in a more of a fertility religion. And there were a lot of problems with the early days of Wicca. There was certainly a lot of masochism, certainly a lot of sexual abuse that was going on in some of these circles, and sexual coercion, that kind of stuff. That I have not seen. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist some places. I have not seen that, or I am not aware of that in any existing Wiccan covens. The Wiccan covens that I know are very strict and clear about boundaries and respect, and I do not use any kind of sexual initiations or sexual coercion by any means. And so that is something that is a thing of the past, but it's really was an attempt, I think, to create another religion and an option besides Church of England, the Anglican Church, right? And there wasn't a lot, and this was an attempt to free themselves. And in many ways, they were in the early days, especially recreating the rituals of these ceremonial traditions, that exchanging language that had alluded more towards like Golden Dawn and other Christian esoteric stuff, and replacing it with imagery and gods that were more like polytheistic and earth centered and feminine. And a lot of good has come out of that over the years. And just there is, within Wiccan circles, there's a lot of very specific skills and training that people can learn and define community and especially if you are someone who really thrives in ritual and really thrives in structure and thrives through the process of initiation. I think that a Wiccan path can be very helpful. And most Wiccans I know don't even really call themselves Wiccans. They just call themselves witches.
Yeah.
And they're practicing a tradition of witchcraft that is known to most people as Wicca. I mean, Wicca or Wisha, it comes from an old English word that meant like magic person or whatever the equivalent of a priest or a warlock. I mean, we don't really have a clear translation for what it means now. Hear it used in Vikings, in the television show Vikings. There's one scene where I guess they've come across one of the Viking priests. I don't really remember what was going on there, but the characters or the actors are speaking in Old English, and there's subtitles, and they use the word shaman, which is not really accurate because shaman is a very specific tradition that comes out of East Asia. But that's what this television show used, and you can hear them use the word wisha for what they're trying to say, what they think of as shaman. Yeah. And so that I was so excited when I saw that. I'm like, oh, they're using it. Oh yeah. But and it's spelled Wice, but it's Wicca is spelled Wica. So it's really like an opportunity to try to embrace the old magic that way. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah. No, this is great. I love everything you're saying, and I'm just giving the people. I'm going to give some facts. That's all. So you're doing great. This is fantastic. So we have a very good explanation from Courtney, and I'm going to read to you a little bit of the explanation from the Encyclopedia Britannica. The Encyclopedia Britannica defines Wicca as the largest modern pagan or neo-pagan religion. Its followers, who are called Wiccans, typically identify as witches and draw inspiration largely from the pre-Christian religions of Europe. Having publicly emerged in England during the 1950s, Wicca is now found primarily in Western countries, and the number of Wiccans is probably in the low hundreds of thousands. Followers usually use a pentagram or fine pointed star as the main symbol of their religion. So we know, and we'll get more into it in a minute with some of these other facts about the symbolism and then how it's been like abused by the public to be like, oh, these people are doing all these things that they're not actually doing. So just like Courtney was just mentioning, the modern origins of Wicca start with this guy. His name was Gerald Gardner. He was a retired British civil servant, and he spent a lot of his career in Asia, and he learned a lot about the different religions and indigenous religions of the people in different parts of Asia. I don't know exactly where in Asia. I can't tell you. It just says Asia. I didn't get to do that much research there. But he also read a lot of Western esoteric literature, and he was really into the writings of Crowley. So Crowley is somebody who we have to have a whole episode on. We haven't done it yet, but it's happening at some point. Don't worry. We're going to talk about it because we have to. So upon returning to Britain in the 1930s, he became involved in the British like occult community. So there's like a bunch of, not a bunch, but there's stories that he met somebody, just like Courtney was saying, he met somebody who was part of this New Forest coven that he didn't know existed. He met this person. And then in one of the stories I heard, he said that he heard her say the word Wicca. So he was like, okay, we'll call it that because I guess that's what it's called. But that's one story. Then again, like Courtney said, this may have been true or it may have not. We don't really know if it's true. Historians can't agree or disagree about it. But they know that he formed this religion of Wicca, kind of a more formalized religion in the 1930s. Then in 1951, Britain had archaic witchcraft laws, and they were like, wait, this is stupid. Let's just repeal these. So they did. And then Gardner was like, great, I can let my witch flag fly. So he did, and he started his own coven of followers, and he had the assistance of one of his high priestesses in the coven named Doreen Valiente. Sorry. Sometimes I get tripped up on like Ente names. I don't know why. It's my brain. The way it works is a little weird sometimes. And they developed what would now be called Garnerian Wicca. So there's different types of Wicca depending on, and it goes on a little later, talks about different people like this Englishman named Alexander Sanders. He founded his Alexandrian Wicca. And then there is a person named Victor Anderson and Cora Anderson. I think they were a couple. And they very tradition of Wicca. And there's some others that I will see in my notes at some point. So these are all also people who either studied under Gardner or read a lot of his writings. Wicca spread really rapidly throughout the United States, especially during the 1960s and 1970s with the counterculture and people being sick of like wars and different things like that. And people started joining Wicca at like a crazy rate at that point. Also, it was really big with second wave feminists, and they even started a kind of their own. They had Dianic Wicca, and it was started in 1971 by a Hungarian woman named Susanna Budapest, who was born in 1940. And for her, it was more of a women's tradition of Wicca. Then, I didn't know this at all, drawing on the gay rights movement, there was Minoan Brotherhood that was established in 1977 by this guy named Eddie Bozinski. Mm-hmm. And it was a Wiccan tradition for gay and bisexual men. I didn't know that. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And it also got really popular because people became really more involved about taking care of the environment. So since it's like, it was always presented as like a nature religion, right? So everybody's like, oh, this is a great way to help preserve the environment, get more into nature, learn more about nature. And then there was a lot of left, obviously most people who are witches, whether they're Wiccan or not, are usually left-wing people. Most of it. I haven't met a really strong conservative right-wing witch yet. I mean, email me if one. Be curious.
If they pop up on my feed, they end up getting blocked pretty fast. They're out there, but no,
Interesting.
they're not the dominant.
But radical left-wing politics came to the fore in the work of Starhawk, an American practitioner who helped establish the reclaiming the tradition in San Francisco and wrote a very influential book called The Spiral Dance. Although actually they said a lot of people in the conservative movement at first really hated Wicca, but then there were some, just like Courtney just said, who came towards it a little bit later, especially like with the nature part of it. People really loved it. So there's other groups that have been influenced by Wicca, but they aren't necessarily Wiccan groups. There's a church called the Church of All Worlds, and a lot of modern druids. I'm so sorry. I was like, oh, this word's hard for me to say. Druids. So a lot of like people who call themselves druids now, this has been widely influenced. And also like druids in general is more of a Celtic thing, British Isles. So it makes a lot of sense, right? A lot of these groups end up getting really mixed up with Satanists. And again, I can't say it, but followers of Lucifer, which especially happened during the like satanic panic in the 1980s. And if you don't know what the satanic panic is, it was basically a time where everybody was blaming everything on Satan worshipers. It was like a thing. It wasn't happening. It was a thing people made up and they just assumed everything was like that, but it wasn't. So during that time, people would pull out pentagrams and be like, see, it's the work of the devil. But I literally had nothing to do with that at all. So, okay, then during the religion's first 2 decades, people would join through a pre-existing coven a lot of the time. So it would be a group. A coven sometimes had specific numbers, like maybe 13 people or whatnot. But a lot of times people would join through a group. This is at the very beginning. Now, a lot of people are solitary practitioners of Wicca. It's very common. And even witches in general, you'll see a lot of people just say they're solitary practitioners. They don't have to do it in a group. They might participate in some group stuff, with other witches, but usually not practicing if they don't want to. Then you've got tons of fun movies that we all know. Everybody loves The Craft. And then you have like Buffy the Vampire and like Charmed and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which made everybody want to be a witch. So it didn't really involve Wicca, but everybody got really into learning something about it because they were like, ooh, look at all these fun movies and all these fun characters. So that happened a lot in the 1990s and the 2000s. You saw a lot of teenagers getting into it. And even now, you still see a lot of people in their 20s and a lot of teenagers getting really into it. Because it's very like going against the grain. I think when you're in that rebellious stage, people see it as like, well, I can pick Wicca or witchcraft is going against the grain. So a lot of people do that. Something you see a lot. Wicca with itself has a lot of different practices, a broad number. The kind of thing that's cool about it is different for whoever wants to practice it. Some people think of the god and the goddess. Some people just think of a goddess. Some people don't really involve themselves with too much deity work. It's whatever people, if they're solitary practitioners, they do whatever they want. And just trying to give you the highlights here. There's different terminology. Some people are a part of covens, or some people are high priests or high priestesses. And it just depends again. Oh, and throughout Wiccan history, which I saw, this was interesting too. There have been covens that actually have excluded gay or transgender people, but since the beginnings of it, it's way more inclusionary now. People are way more open to that, and obviously people can pick and find whatever kind of coven works for them, or none at all if that's not what they want.
Yeah, and if that's the specific, one of the things one of my teachers taught me is that, especially if you read these older witchcraft books where they really admonish homosexuality, it's because that when those were being published in many places, it was a crime to be gay.
Yeah.
And so whether it was part of it was ignorance, and yeah, there was some homophobia, but it also was a matter of trying to protect the groups, like, oh, we don't do that, and
Yeah.
even because it was illegal. I mean, I feel like I really don't know that many straight people in the witchcraft community, period. I just feel like
I know.
everybody's a little bit gay. Most people are just a little bit gay. And unfortunately, there are still some traditions that exclude trans people. Those groups are getting more and more heat as time goes on. And I think it's really it makes me like, I won't be in a circle if I find out that anyone of a specific gender is not allowed. I respect the space for women's circles, and those women's circles need to include trans women, because trans women have a very specific experience of being a woman that is valuable and beautiful and needs to be given space.
Absolutely.
A lot that cis women can learn from trans women. So I am not going to be in a space where trans women are not allowed. And I've actually drawn that boundary when I've been asked to speak at places that are advertised as being women centered. I'm like, okay, but cannot only be for cis women. I don't want that. So and I haven't heard as much from some of these anti-trans groups in the last few years. Part of it maybe because of the pandemic, there's just not the opportunity for people to get together. And so it just hasn't even been a question. And there's just more trans affirming groups and resources for trans witches that we haven't, that weren't around when I first started practicing. So that is good. It needs to continue. And being mindful that in a lot of traditions around the world, esoteric, religious, spiritual, what have you, is that trans people were holy and revered, and often took the role of being the spiritual wise person. I mean, we're talking ancient Greek, ancient Roman, a lot of different cultures here in North America. So it's not something that's new.
Yeah.
Right? It's certainly something that is very ancient. And I mean, Rachel Pollack, may she rest in peace, is an absolutely incredible writer and tarot mind, and she herself was trans. She gave a very powerful interview once, and that when she was reading the Old Testament, and that in one, I guess it was probably Leviticus, where it says, no man shall cut off his member and dress in women's clothing. She didn't take that as an admonishment of being like that, oh no, God hates me, or that. She took that as an acknowledgement that people like her have existed since the beginning. She said, how can you ban that which is not real? She said, so there were trans women, or who might now identify as trans women, but the context is very different. We don't know how these individuals would have identified themselves. So I want to be very careful. I don't want to label these ancient people, but Rachel saw herself in the people that Leviticus was trying to extinguish. And she's like, how can you ban something that doesn't exist? There were people like me back then.
Exactly.
And so that was so beautiful, and such a gracious and wise way of looking at it, when people are using this as a tool of oppression to oppress people like Rachel. And instead, Rachel's like, yay, your tool of oppression is your tool to help me feel seen.
Yeah. You're literally affirming my existence. Like, okay, thank you, I guess. Like,
well, she thought it was a wonderful thing.
And I love that. I love that she took that thing. And she was like, I met Rachel Pollack once, and her book was actually one of the first tarot books I read, and it was way above my head. I had to read it like 3 times. And then when I met her, like, for the first time, I was fangirling, so I was nervous. Like, I was like, and then like she would like sign my book, and she was really nice. And then I ended up going to like dinner with like this group of people I was with, and she sat next to me, and she just told me like dirty jokes the whole time, and they were really funny. And I was like, I'm obsessed with this woman. She's so cool. Like, she was such a cool lady. Oh, I love her. Rachel Pollack was really neat.
Yeah, the world is worse off without her.
I know, honestly. Oh, Rachel Pollack, great. Okay, so that's what your little rundown of Wicca. I have like the Wiccan read, but I'm going to put it in the blog so anybody can read it if they want. And okay, so we're going to get to our last section of the show. We're going to talk about something Courtney knows again a lot about this time, because she wrote a book on Hekate. Yay! I'm going to give you, this is like the quick and dirty. I recommend you read the whole book, because this is just a synopsis, guys. I'm not going to read everything in the book. We'll be here for a while, and it's a really good book, so I recommend you just go get it and read it. So we're going to talk about Hekate. Now, I personally see a lot of people, again, TikTok, Witchtok. People love Hekate. I love her too. But to me, I don't, and maybe this is just my experience, so I'm not saying anything about anyone else. I don't know how people are like, this is the first deity I'm going to work with, because she's like a lot. So I don't know. Like, to me, I'm like, are you guys okay? Is everything all right? Because when Hekate entered my life, she came in like a storm. She was ready to tell me the truth about everything. I ready for it? It didn't matter to her. She was like, this is the facts. Why are you doing this? This is wrong. I was like, oh, okay. Sorry. She was very real, in my face, and wasn't playing any games. So God bless all you people out there who are like, I'm going to become a devotee of Hekate. I do it. She's great. I absolutely adore Hekate. Just know that, and you talk about this in your book too, actually, just know that she's not here to, she is a very loving deity, but she's also not here to just coddle you. She's not like that. And it was very interesting when I was reading the beginning of your book when you talk about your experience with her. But yeah, I don't see her as a sweet, loving grandma kind of entity. She's not like that. I'm just letting you know off the top. The quote, so this is actually the quote right in front of Courtney's book, and this is from Hesiod. He said of Hekate in 700 BCE, said, For this day, whenever any one of men on earth offers rich sacrifices and prays for favor according to custom, he calls upon Hekate. Great honor comes full easily to him whose prayers the goddess receives favorably, and she bestows wealth upon him, for the power surely is with her. So you're like, who's Hekate? Let me tell you, if you don't know. So she's super popular. She's one of the witch goddesses, queen of magic and that kind of thing. We'll go into it. AKA, so some of her nicknames. She's got the most lovely one, the worker from afar, three-headed hound of the moon, influence from afar, the one who goes before the gate, the light bringer, and the queen of the night, and the goddess of witches, which is on the front of Courtney's book, Hekate, goddess of witches. She is the queen of the crossroads, and I love talking about crossroads. I feel like, I know, Nugget. Everybody has a crossroads deity, and I feel like in every culture, we talked about Eshu a while ago. He's a crossroads in Yoruba culture. And she is the keeper of the keys, meaning she has the keys to the gates to the afterlife. Where is she from in the world? Where's she come from? Well, there's a little bit of, nobody really knows at this point because she's in a bunch of different places. There's some lore about her in Bulgaria. There's some lore in Syria. There's a lot of lore in Greece, obviously. And then we also have a lot of stuff about her in Turkey. So, and some people even think Egypt. So there's a strong possibility that she has an origin from a god named Hekate, a frog-headed Egyptian goddess of fertility and childbirth, who, somewhat like Hekate, was associated with the rulers. The word Heka in Egyptian language is also both the word for magic and the name of the god of magic and medicine, Heka. So they think it might be associated with that, and that is, I got that from the Encyclopedia of Spirits. She also may be from what is now modern-day Georgia by the Black Sea, because it's the home of Medea, who's one of her most famous devotees. You talk a lot about Medea in the book too. And along with Hecate, which was the queen of Troy, who also was a really famous devotee of Hekate. She's the chief deity of Caria, which is now in Western Turkey, modern-day Western Turkey. She's also, one of the most interesting things about her in Greek mythology is that Hekate technically is a Titan. Now, if you guys know, and again, one day we're going to have to do Greek mythology 101. If you know anything about Greek mythology, Zeus really didn't like the Titans. And it actually, this just occurred to me right now. Zeus, much like, what's my boy's name? Odin, he was not down with these giants. Odin, same. Remember, we talked about Odin a while ago. Odin went up there and he killed a whole bunch of giants and then made them go live in Jotunheim. Well, so did Zeus. Zeus was not about the Titans. But except for Hekate, he let her live with the rest of them. The rest of the Titans he pushed away and made them go away because he didn't like them. So Hekate is actually the daughter of two titans, and she is the confidant and the handmaiden of Persephone. We're going to tell that story too. It's a good story. Who's the queen of the dead, married to Hades, that one. Remember, her mom's Demeter. She had to go looking for her. It was a whole thing. Hekate actually ended up hanging out with Persephone because she was looking for her, for Demeter. So she ended up staying down there with Persephone when she's down there and comes back up. Hekate is the goddess of life, death, regeneration, and magic. She's petitioned for crimes against women or girls, justice, wishes, protection to and from dogs, because she loves dogs, fertility, healing, and she also helps get rid of ghosts. She's one of the most powerful deities we got. Even Zeus is nervous. Not like
Zeus gave her a bunch of stuff so that she'd be busy and would leave him alone.
Yeah.
He was scared of his auntie, and he gave her the stuff that he was afraid of. So like the depths of the sea.
Yeah.
And the realm of the dead. He's like, here, auntie, these are for you.
Exactly. Zeus. So I think so far by doing of this podcast, the two women that Zeus seems most nervous about is Hekate, and he's super afraid of Nyx. We talked about Nyx before too. Super afraid of her. And they're both like nighttime deities. Zeus is just afraid of the dark. That's what I just figured out. Zeus is just fearful of the dark. So apparently one time, so Hekate is also a messenger, but between gods. She's a messenger between the different gods. One time she stole Hera's beauty cream and gave it to Europa because Europa wanted it. And Hera got pissed off. And then she pursued Hekate, who first flew into the bed of a woman in childbirth, then into a funeral procession. Then she flew into a lake in Hades, where she was cleansed by the Kabiri. Hekate then emerged. She came out more powerful than ever, the goddess of birth, death, and purification. So she went to go get purified and then became the goddess of purification. So that's how cool she is. She's also rules the passages between life and death, and she's invoked by all sorts of people who do death work and necromancers. She's totally and completely loved by midwives, witches, healers, herbalists, dogs, dog lovers, rescue dogs, and those who protect and ride horses. She's a shapeshifter, and she has a couple different animal forms that she can turn into. She's also seen in three, like in a group of three. You know, she's one of those goddesses. We have a couple of them that we know. Her colors are black, purple, and all her rituals, well, most of them are to be done at night since she's the queen of the night. So that's your quick and dirty rundown of Hekate or Hekate, whichever one. I always say Hekate, but I don't know. That's what I say. Oh, thank you, Nugget. That's our quick and dirty rundown. I seriously recommend you read Courtney's book about Hekate. It's like super detailed. She gives you the history. She gives you rituals in there. And I really enjoy that book. That's once I started working with her, actually your book was the one that helped me understand her the most. So I really thank you for writing your book.
My pleasure, Ashley. And thank you for saying that. I'm so happy that it was helpful for you.
Oh yeah, super helpful. Because I was like, this deity is a lot. And I was like, okay, I get it. I see what she likes. And now me and Hekate were like besties. I love her. Okay, so that actually brings us to the end of our show today. Courtney, thank you so much for being here.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Okay.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in getting further involved in their witchcraft, they want to come hang out with me and things, I am co-hosting a 2-day virtual conference called So Mote That Con. And it is hosted by my podcast, That Witch Life. And it's all about living as a witch in today's world. We have 10 different presenters who'll be offering their expertise on everything from hoodoo for liberation to working with the goddess Freya to how to make your magic more accessible. And we have a special keynote with author Laurel K. Hamilton. She's a New York Times bestselling author of the Anita Blake vampire series. Mm-hmm. So let people, so if you go to my website at my podcast website at thatwitchlife.com, you can find out how to register. And if you can't make it on the weekend or you can't be there the whole time, everything is getting recorded and will be emailed to you afterwards, so you won't miss a thing.
Yay! I will have all that in the show notes so everyone, you can go and sign up for the conference and listen to all the good information and all the juicy stuff. And that sounds awesome. I love it. Okay. Yay. This has been great. I have really enjoyed you being on here. Thank you so much, Courtney. And I just want to say thank you all for listening. This is Dine with the Divine. And if you like it, like us on Instagram, Facebook. Oh, yeah. And I have a TikTok. I always forget to mention that. Again, please give us a rating. I love ratings and I hate begging for them. Just give me one, please. It's not a big deal.
2 minutes and it does more good than you could possibly know.
Exactly. Thank you. See, Courtney has a podcast. She knows the deal. I love you guys. Oh, so, and like I said, if you have any suggestions or any subjects you're like, I really want to hear about that on the episode, let me know. Email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And if you want to follow me, Ashley, I'm Sankofa HS. That's SANKOFAHS. And I'm Sankofa Healing Sanctuary on Facebook. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank Courtney again. And I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.